Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Franchise Your Success. We have our coach, Dan Olsen, in the house. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm amazing. I'm always great when I'm hanging out with you guys. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And it's a pleasure to have you here as well. So people are more secure about buying a franchise. This is awesome. We have a whole bunch of following that are really interested in doing it. So what are some of the do's and the don'ts of franchising? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So if I were to buy a franchise, what are some of the tips that you could give me?
Well, there's a whole lot. I think when you first start looking at different franchises, as we mentioned before, over 4,000 choices to look at, and there's more new ones coming out all the time. I see new ones popping in, every month. There's several new ones coming up. So here's the thing that I look at. First, as a foundation, you look at a franchise that's well established, and you could go out there and you can look at a lot of the sandwich places, or you could look at some of the food places that have been around for a long time. But sometimes those are harder to get to because you can't find a location because they're all snapped up by existing franchisees. So that's more of an existing franchise company that's well down the road. Then there's the emerging franchises. These are the ones that are newer, and they're starting to grow a little bit, and they got 20, 30, 40, 50 locations, and they're proving themselves. And that's usually the area that I like to look at, is not necessarily the really long established ones. I remember when I first got involved with Massage Envy, what was called more of maybe even a micro emerging franchise. Ooh. They only had 4 locations when they first started, or when I first started working with them. And so as they moved forward, we helped bring on more franchisees. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. I got to see the inside scoop of some of these. And so I thought, I got to grab some of these as well. So I ended up acquiring with a partner, Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Michigan. And we built those up and sold them. And so it was a great experience to see at the micro emerging level some of these franchises that are growing. So the thing is that you got to take in business, you got to take a calculated risk sometimes. But the cool thing about a franchise is you're taking less of a calculated risk, because if you can really dive in and see the system and the program behind it, then you have something. And I would say the most important thing on a do to really investigate on a franchise, there's a lot of things, but the heart of it is the financials. When you think about it, why do you buy a franchise? Why do you acquire a business? Why do you start a business? Is it just for your pleasure? Is it just to enjoy? Sure, that's part of it. But you acquire a business, you start a business to make money. So you got to know if it makes money. And one way to do that, of course, is to look at what's called the franchise disclosure document. And there's an item number 19 that talks about financial representations. You go right there and you see if they offer financial representation. Some of the more mature franchises will offer those. Some of the newer ones can be less likely to offer those financials because they don't have as long a track record. So you've got to do your investigation on the financials. And that usually comes in the form maybe of going actually through the franchisor or other franchisees and look at the financials. And there's a quick formula that I use to determine that. So, because people will tell me numbers, and sometimes you don't want to necessarily trust all those numbers. But the way that I can trust those numbers a little bit more is I look at the average ticket price, or the average price for the service. Let's say it's $100 for the service per month, and then the average number of clients or customers per week. So I can multiply those two together, and I can come up. So if it's $100 for the service, and then it's 100 customers per week are using that service, 100 times 100 is $10,000. So I know that business is probably doing around $10,000 per week, or roughly 42,000, 43,000 a month, or roughly $500,000 a year. So if I'm in the market for a franchise that's going to produce me $500,000 in sales every year, that hopefully can produce, every franchise is different, but if it produces 20% profit, as an example, that's $100,000 a year in income that I can invest in and not necessarily have to be there on a day-to-day basis. And this is going to be a little bit longer answer, Marjorie, because it's important. Because I'm also not only going to talk about the money, but I'm going to talk about the time.
Gotcha.
Because some people don't have the time. They've got a job, they've got other commitments, and they just don't have time to have for another job, a full-time job. So some franchises, you got to look at the time as well. So you're looking at the money side. And like I mentioned, you can check the numbers by actually checking and see the number of clients that they're getting times multiplied by the average ticket. So that's an important side analysis besides whatever numbers they can offer to you. You want to look at those numbers as well. But the other thing you want to look at is your time. You don't want to just trade your time for money. This is an investment. It's a serious investment. And so you want to look at the possibility of having what's called a semi-absentee-owned type business. And it's been my experience that a lot of franchise companies or even business opportunities will say, come on in and we'll jump in here and you can run this absentee owned, or it's completely passively owned. Be careful with that, because it's tough to start a business and all of a sudden it's bringing you passive income, or it's bringing you absentee profits. What I've found is when you're starting a business, if you're running it absentee owned, you also have absentee profits, which we don't want. So we want to be able to make money. So it's either you're running it full time or you're running it semi-absentee owned. The ones that I've stuck with over the years that have worked very, very well are the semi-absentee owned. They're the ones that you're working 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a week to manage the manager. Once you get it established and up and running, then you're managing your manager, or you're managing the people at the location so that you're not spending full time there. You can go off and do other things. That's making good use of your time. And so you want to look at money and you want to look at time involved. So you want to ask the questions to the franchisees. You want to ask the questions to the franchisor. How much time are you spending, or are the franchisee spending per week in the franchise to operate it properly? Then you also want to ask, what are the average ticket prices, and what's the average number of clients or customers coming in? And then you can simply multiply that and check their numbers based on what you're finding in there. So those are the two big things, time and money.
Gotcha. And that's interesting because that's a really big red flag that some people take for granted, time, because time is such a great investment. You can't recover your time. And one of the things that I also heard from you right now is that there's the semi-absentee and the full quote unquote absentee. You cannot have that. What other red flags have you seen when purchasing a franchise?
Well, there's a red flag, but any franchisor that tells you, oh man, just invest and we're going to run it for you and take care of everything for you, those are few and far between. In fact, the one that I'm thinking about where they were selling and they sold a ton of franchises. I'm not going to say the name because it's kind of disturbing to me, but basically they would have people come in and pay $25,000, $30,000 and say, we'll take care of it all for you. And you just sit back and collect your money. I would run from things like that. In fact, the people who are running that now, I know have been convicted of some type of charges. I'm not going to say a whole lot what it is. But so you got to be careful that anytime you acquire a franchise, you got to put some time into it. And therefore, you want to have a little bit of passion for it. You want to be able to feel good about what you're offering. And some of the most highest standard individual business people that I know and I work with, and I'm grateful to have those people as friends. Those are the people I choose to hang out with. I was just talking to one of my friends this morning. He says, I had an opportunity to invest in this particular business and I was ready to invest. But then as I got going, there's nothing wrong with the people. The people were great in the franchise that were backing them up. The money was great. In fact, he says, if I had invested in this particular business, I expected to make $300,000 this year. So it was that good. And so he was very, very excited about it. But then as he started looking at it and thinking, okay, as I work through this and as I do the steps that they're taking, I didn't feel good about it. So one of the red flags is, do you feel good about it? Do you feel like you can really get into it and have that passion for it? Sure, you can probably develop that passion, but in this case, this gentleman, this guy, a good friend of mine, he says, you know what? I could have made all this money, but I just didn't feel personally good about it. So I'm going to go invest in this other business that's maybe a little bit, he made a little bit less money with the deal, but he felt good about it. He felt, I can get into this. I can really feel good about promoting the product, and I feel good about promoting the people behind it. And I can feel good about myself, most of all. And so, you know, I applaud that type of person. And that's the type of person I think we all want to try to be. We're not perfect, of course, but we want to try to be that person where we're not just in it for the money, because if we're just in it for the money, that's one of the red flags. If the money's flashed around and we're just doing it for the money, there's a lot of reasons why we do business, of course, but and as I mentioned, monies and time are important, but we want to have that passion. And red flags are things that the emotions inside of you, if it just tears you apart to be able to offer that service. So one of the ways to get through that is, let's say that it's a service business or even a food business. Go in, if you're hesitating, okay, and you're on the line, I don't know if I want to invest in that business. Okay, so go in and stand behind the counter for a half a day and actually serve some of the food, or actually see how it's prepared. See if you can feel, even though you may not be doing that as a semi-absentee owner, you still want to have that experience and that feel what your employees would be going through, so you can back that up and feel good about it. Same thing with a service business. Let's say it's a dry cleaning business. Go in behind the counter and get a feel for those customers coming in the door, what they're saying, what they're feeling. And if you're feeling that may make the decision, if you're on the fence emotionally, and from a red flag of thinking, I just don't think I can do this for the next 10 years.
Oof, yeah.
Versus, I feel good about offering this service because you've actually done it. So that's a good way to get over that hurdle of that red flag of, maybe this isn't for me because I don't feel good about it.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like an undercover boss situation that you would run in there.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that with one of your franchises where you actually did the services for the clients that you were having? Oh
yeah, I've gone in some of the food franchises, and I've actually helped fix some of the fries, or I've helped fix some of the sandwiches and things like that. Or you watch it being done, and that's good. Now, I didn't do it with massage franchises I was with, because you don't go in the room when you're giving a massage. They want to have it private and everything. But I have gone and got a massage, and I see how they do it, and I see the service that they offer, and so one of the things you can do is actually go experience the service, go experience the food, and not just once. Go several times and see how the experience is over a period of 2 or 3, 4 times, and see if it's the same. And hopefully it's the same, because that's what a franchise does. It sets up that system where it's the same. Now, in like a haircutting type franchise, it'll be a little bit different. If a home care type franchise, you're going to have a different personality of that person taking care of that elderly person in their home. So it's going to be a little bit different from that standpoint, but the system should be the same behind it that backs it up.
Gotcha. And that's really interesting. And I bet that you also had your family helping you check on those services and make sure that the quality was the same over time.
That's right. I have 5 children, and these are amazing children, and every one of them have worked with me in my franchising businesses over the years. And I'm so grateful to have the family part of that. And so when someone talks to me about, hey, can my family be involved with this? By all means, you want your family involved with it as much as they want to be involved. Sometimes they got their own careers and they're off doing whatever they want to do. And that's what happened with my children, is they came in, we worked together for a while, and then they went off and got their own careers. And that's great. But I still have a couple of them working with me still to this day. And I'm grateful for that, to be able to have that commonality with my family. But the other thing is, I'm older. And you want the younger generation in there checking things out too. So you're right, Marjorie. That's a thing that we really want to look at. And I was just talking to a 30-year-old guy last night that's checking out a franchise. And he says, yeah, our generation is different than you guys. But so we see it a little bit different. So it's a great idea is to come in and have your child that you work with, hey, would you please go check this out? Go have a sandwich on me over here, or go take your clothing over here, or go get a massage over here, or go have a spa treatment over here, and check it out for me and get their opinion, because generational differences can make a difference in how the franchise progresses in the future.
That's right. And I feel like also analyzing that in the long run, it's going to be really productive for the franchise itself, because you're not just targeting one type of people only. If you really want to like
Right.
make sure that your franchise grows as fast as possible, you need to target as many people as you can from different types, different backgrounds, different likes, I guess, in the case of food. So that's really cool. What are some other tips that you would give us if I wanted to like purchase a franchise?
All right. So another important thing is get to know the people behind the franchise. And one of the things that I will say is none of the people are perfect, but in the franchise disclosure document, they have to list two things that sometimes can become red flags. Number one is, has any of the officers of that company been involved with lawsuit?
Oh.
And have any of those officers of that company been involved with a bankruptcy over the past 10 years? And so that has to be listed. But you know what? All the major franchises that I've seen come across, there's always something in there. There's usually a lawsuit. I remember working with one particular company that was growing very, very fast. And the first 2 years, they had two or three lawsuits. It wasn't a company that I owned, by the way. But they had 2 or 3 lawsuits very quickly, right out of the box. So you have to look at the reasons why they had the lawsuits. And then if you feel comfortable with the answer, then you can still move forward. But sometimes you may hesitate. Someone that's gone through bankruptcy, you don't know the circumstance. So you sometimes want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So those are the things that we look at for the people. But every person makes mistakes. And I guess that's one of my faults. People have accused me of being too trusting and allow people to take advantage of me. And it's sometimes come back and maybe hasn't been the best thing, but I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I want to trust them. But sometimes you have to really get to know that person one-on-one to understand. And that may be in this day and age more over a Zoom meeting back and forth, feeling comfortable with them. But the better if you can shake their hand and maybe even give them a hug, because you've developed that kind of relationship with that franchisor, that you're going to be the type of franchisee that will be the brand champion for that brand to help them move forward. You got to feel that good about the brand, of course, but you got to feel good about the people. So as you talk to the people and get to know them, that's an important aspect. The other thing is getting to know some of the franchisees themselves. And some of the micro emerging brands may not have a lot of franchisees. They may only have 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and some of them some may not be willing to talk to you. But you do your best to talk to 1 or 2 or 3 of the franchisees and see how they're doing, see how the support of the company is. A lot of times they'll hesitate to give you their actual financial numbers because that's their business. They may not want to share that with you, but you certainly can ask the questions that I asked before. What's your average? Okay, you don't need to give me your numbers. Don't give me your revenue and your profit, because you want to keep those more private sometimes. Sometimes they're happy to give it to you. Oh yeah, man, we're doing $1 million a year and I'm putting 25% to the bottom line. And sometimes they may like to do that, and that's okay. But most of the times they want to keep that private. But the questions you can ask them is, what is the average ticket price you're getting? And what are the number of customers you have come in the door every week? They'll give you that. And then you can do your multiplication, and then you can figure out, okay, what's your labor cost? What's your rent, percentage of rent? What percentage you're spending in marketing? You can ask those questions, and then you can put your own P&L together. It's pretty easy to do. And it's just another way to look at the financial side. But I think as long as the financials are good, some of the most important questions to ask the franchisees is, how is the support? Do you feel like you're getting the support? How is the system? Is the system clear? Are you able to see the step-by-step process unfolding before you? Is it easy to follow? Is it replicatable in your area? So those are probably more of the important questions I like to ask. And then how the people treated you. How has the franchisor treated you? And how have you treated them? Are you feeling good about your relationship with them? So you put them on the spot a little bit and see how the relationship is. Those are important questions. There's a lot more to ask, but that's a whole nother topic.
And I feel like that people is such an important aspect when it comes to a franchise, because if you do have a really good relationship from the franchisee to the main owner of the franchise, it's going to get reflected into the employees, I feel like. So if you were to go to one of these branches of, let's say, a food franchise, and you get to see all the employees being happy, I feel like that also gives you a really good hint of how good this franchise is and how you can invest in them.
Culture, and I'll end with this. It's extremely important. I mean, I could see it in the hair salon industry or any industry you walk into. I could go in the back room of a hair salon in some of the franchises that I work with, and I could look at their bulletin board, and I could see which franchises were successful and which were not, just by almost looking at the bulletin board, because the owner and manager were putting up goals, and they're putting up, little quotes, and they're bringing them in lunch once in a while, and they're bringing them little gift cards and thanking them, and they're grateful for their employees. And that's reflected on that bulletin board. And you go on the other one, and it would say, oh, you screwed up last night. You didn't do this, or you didn't do that, or this didn't happen. Almost always that franchise was not doing as well as the one where they were creating that positive culture, as simple as putting something up on a bulletin board in the back of the room.
That's a really good tip. Let's also take a look at the culture then before purchasing a franchise.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. That was so helpful, because now I feel like we do have the do's and the don'ts for buying a franchise like a pro. Thank you so much again for today.